Hello, and welcome to another special election edition of the Orchard Cast. Each week of the ongoing Canadian federal election, I'll be joined by a different guest to discuss key issues and developments in the campaign. Episodes of this special series will be free for anyone who wants to listen. But if you like the work I do and want to hear full episodes of the regular Orchard Cast, please consider becoming a paid subscriber. This week, we've got a very special guest. Shama Rangwala is an assistant professor in the humanities at York University. Her work focuses on critiques of liberalism from the left. You also might recognize her as the co host of the excellent pop culture criticism podcast, Replay, which she hosts alongside journalist Desmond Cole. Shama, how are you enjoying the spectacle of election season?
Well, first of all, I just want to say I'm really happy to be here with you, Jeremy, longtime comrade, and yeah, talking about the election. How am I enjoying it? I mean, the word enjoy encompasses, so many different kinds of emotions, and um, I think that this is an extremely important election, and I see all kinds of people saying, like, I'm so tired of being told every election that this is the most important election. But I do think that we can point to a lot of really concrete ways that this is actually the most important election, I would say, in the last decade at least. But a lot of what's happening geopolitically that is like deeply affecting domestic issues and of course Canadian foreign policy, economy, we're entangled with all kinds of ways in the world. um this, we hate the unprecedented, but there are a lot of circumstances that we have not seen before. So this election is very important. I don't mean to like lib out by by saying how important it is, but I very much like from a perspective of what kind of government we want in the Canadian state. Maybe we don't want any of these. I think you describe my work as criticism of liberalism from the left, like certainly from the standpoint of like my work and analysis, like none of these are great, but there are differences between them, and I think that it will really matter. So I enjoying is not the word I would use, but I'm following it closely. I live in a swing district, where at least it's being presented as one. So yeah, I mean, how are you enjoying it? It's a lot of work for you in a
Yeah,
good way.
and I found it quite boring. I mean, we'll get to it in a moment, but not much has changed in the average polling. I It's looking like the NDP are going to be severely, if not wiped out, then
Mhm.
diminished in the next parliament. And I do think, and we've both got our critiques of the NDP, but I do think that our democracy will be poorer without a strong party that is to the left of the liberals, even if it's only ever so slightly to the left, as it has been under Jagmeet Singh. I live in also a swing riding. Blake Desjardins is my New
Oh yeah.
Democrat MP, who is great. And he's running against a particularly odious conservative named Kerry Diot, who he defeated in 2021, and now they're sort of doing a rematch. And it's interesting. I mean, by the end of the election, half the NDP caucus might be in Edmonton.
Mhm,
Heather
mhm.
McPherson, just south of me, is the safest NDP riding in the country. I think the only other one that would come close is Alexandre Boulerice in Montreal, who was able to electorally survive the complete, implosion of the Orange Wave across Quebec in 2015 and then 2019. Um, so, um, yeah, it's interesting because this is very much an existential election, and I don't like to say that.
Mhm.
It's almost like the the um, fruits of the 1988 federal free trade election are almost being harvested right now. And at least the first 3 weeks of the campaign that we're talking about, so more than halfway, I don't think the tone of the campaign or the development of the campaign has really met the urgency of the moment we're facing.
Yeah, I mean, I used to be in Heather's riding, so and yeah, like my impression is that that's safe. Blake versus Carrie Diot could not be clearer to
Yeah,
me. I mean,
like
uh,
it's literally good and evil.
yeah, like you know, I think the decimation of the NDP is not good. For a whole like apparatus of, quote unquote social democracy, but they have not been good. And so if this like forces them to kind of rebuild, um, I I I don't know. I mean, I just don't see anything from them that would make you vote for them, or like get excited to campaign for the NDP. Of course, they're individuals who are good, right? I mean, like a lot of the stuff in the House of Commons on Palestine has been put forth by, um, you know, Heather for sure, Lindsay Matheson, Matthew Green. So like those are, real like heart of the NDP support right now, I would say. But man, why is Jagmeet still leader? I have no idea. He's doing these TikToks where he looks beautiful. I mean, extremely like a handsome man and like really like youth. I did not know how young Pierre Poilievre is. He's almost a millennial. He's like millennial cusp, and he gives off like pure like boomer energy.
Mhm.
And Jagmeet Singh still like youthful energy, like extremely attractive, and they know that, and they're sort of having him do these like get ready with me's, but it doesn't matter. It does not have any purchase anymore. And also this kind of it did something maybe when it was him and Trudeau because they were both young, like young and attractive and energetic. But this is not. I don't see what the NDP is offering, and we need like a leftist party, which is hard to do because the state itself is liberal, right? A leftist party would have to be like a revolutionary party if it existed, which the NDP will never be. But they could, put forth some like, social democracy, and just people are not excited. You it makes sense that it's being decimated.
Yeah, I mean, it really does. I mean, from the height of the Orange Wave, which again came as the NDP, in many ways outflanked the Liberals in the center. I mean, a lot of people forget about that because Jack Layton was like a uniquely likable guy and charismatic. But I mean, if you look at his platform from 2011, um, not a whole lot distinguishing it from the Liberals, except for the personality that was in charge, right? Now, before we go further, I just want to give a quick polling update. According to CBC Poll Tracker, uh, the averages have remained almost the same this week from last week, with one slight exception. The Liberals are leading with 44% of the vote. The Conservatives have 38%, which I believe is 1 percentage point more than last week. So, Poilievre's climbing back up, I guess. The NDP is stuck at 8%. The Bloc Québécois is 5%. Greens have 2%. And the People's Party have 2%. Remember them.
Mhm.
Now, let's get to it. Um, I think Shama, you and I both come from a style of politics that is often not focused on the electoral realm and
Mhm.
is more focused on influencing the sort of collective consciousness and letting that manifest itself in the electoral realm. So I wanted to ask you, do electoral politics matter?
This is the question of of the month, right? Because a lot of people are disillusioned with voting, but I guess one of the things to think about is what is the role of the state in capitalism, right? So we were just talking about the NDP. Um, the contradictions of labor and capitalism are intensifying. The contradictions of imperialism, of who is marked for life and who is marked for death, those are also intensifying. And like in both of those things, it's like very, very spectacular ways, right? So there should be some kind of appetite for something that's not electoral politics, like some kind of revolution, revolutionary tendencies or movements. But we're not really seeing that. We also don't live in 1917. We live in a kind of post 70s world where you can't just organize in your factory and organize the factories around you and overthrow the state and implement the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie, right? We are kind of circumscribed in our political expression by the context that we're in. Though, I think lots of people are trying to like imagine different ways. I think about voting in these kind of bourgeois, like liberal democratic states as like when you go to the store and you think about the freedom of capitalism, like how freedom of voting, right? That we live in a democracy, and that means that we have freedom, is that you can choose between, Per Polyev, or you can choose between Mark Carney. When you go to the store, you can choose between all these different types of Oreos, right? Or you can choose between, like, there's so many, right? And they do make a difference. Like, some of them are like good for diabetics. Like, some of them will kill diabetics. Like, some of them are whatever, right? So there are all of these, like, there are like gradations of differences that matter, but it's presented as if this is freedom. And I do think that we need to think about like what forms of political expression we are participating in, um, because there is a difference between these parties. They're not going to affect the public sector in the same way. They are not going to affect like my sector of academia, healthcare, transportation, geopolitics. But the fundamental purpose of the state is to mediate between labor and capital, um, on behalf of capital, right? To reproduce conditions favorable to wealth accumulation, in like whatever, however you measure it, right? GDP, whatever. Um, so if that is the function of the state, we're talking about different modalities to serve that same function. And, I do think there's a difference. I do think that there's lots of people who choose not to vote because they're like, this is a settler colonial state. It's fake. It's, Canada. Like there are all of these reasons why people would choose not to vote. I think especially for indigenous people to say that they choose not to vote seems to me like super valid. Like I would never say like, as I'm saying that this is a very important election, if you're indigenous or if you're black and you're like, this is, I was like, I'm part of like a racial formation that was like born of like forced displacement and enslavement or like genocide. I'm not going to like participate in the spectacle of electoral politics of that state. I am going to vote in this election, and like my logic for that is that whether you vote for the government in power, whether you vote at all, you're subject to the state and you're going to be subject to those laws regardless. And so it's different from that kind of like lived out, like, you can't complain about the government if you didn't even vote. You absolutely can complain about the government if like, you know what I mean? Because you're subject to it. So
I
it's
think you can't complain about the government if you don't pay taxes. That's my position.
if you well, if you're here and you're subject to the state, I think that you can have your criticisms of the state that you're subject to, right? Whether you're a citizen or not. Um, there are like different ways to do electoral politics where it's not just citizens who vote, it's anybody who has residency,
Mhm.
right? Like that would be another way to do, because they're subject to the state. So yeah, I think that these are different flavors. They're different modalities of mediating labor and capital. Like, so labor meaning not like just workers in general. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna vote. I'm gonna vote. There isn't a party that has my values. What would that? But this is the thing. Like, why do we have to like love? Like, I don't love everything like I buy at the store either because my choices are circumscribed by like I don't know. The food professor would say like supply chains or whatever, right? But like our political expression in some ways, like, takes the form of, like, the context in which we're in, right? But again, revolution is about imagining something entirely different and, like, putting it into practice. But you can't do that as an individual. So I think just, like, in some ways, I would say the election is really important, but the political expression of voting, I think takes on some other extra meaning because it's about these, like, abstractions of, like, freedom and democracy, but they're like actually illusions in all kinds of ways, right? So they're like as much of an illusion that we have this freedom, democratic freedom, as we have like freedom as like consumers, right? And you've used that word spectacle before, but so much of this is the kind of like there's a particular liberal capitalist spectacle to voting, right? That is different in these states than say like the communist parties are in power in Kerala and in I think Tamil Nadu as well, but the Indian state itself is fascist, right? I mean, so there's like different things happening in different parts of the world that are like not really happening here. That's like a very big contradiction there, like widening contradiction between labor and capital and in the march for life, march for death of the fascism, like and colonialism, imperialism, whatever. So yeah, I don't know. Do elections matter? I'm going to vote. I also think we have to think about our political activity and political expression as something that is ongoing. And it's not just it's this like fetishization. It's the sticker that you get when it's like I voted sticker and that feeling, it's like some feeling that you are participating in governance when you're not actually like we do not have the choice between like radically different parties. But I do think that differences between these modalities, matter. But they're both liberal capitalist parties. The conservatives are also liberal capitalist parties, right? Like in the broad sense of like what
Yeah, yeah.
liberalism is. Yeah.
Um, you live in Toronto, St. Paul's?
I live in Toronto, St. Paul's. So it was Carolyn Bennett
Yeah,
for a
and then
long
the
time.
then
Yeah.
the Conservatives won it, like, last year.
They won it in a by it was Don Stewart who won it in a by-election, and that by-election was, not many people voted in that by-election. So it will likely, I think, go liberal, again. The differences between the candidates on the local level are very little. I will say they're both deeply Zionist. Leslie Church, did the March with Israel and took like photo ops and stuff like that. She has said, she just like somewhat recently, when it was Al Quds Day, she said, oh, we need like more policing and stuff because of like violence that could happen at Al Quds Day, which is deeply racist to say that like because it's Al Quds and because like all of like I'm a like Muslim person in her writing that we're just like predisposed to violence,
Mhm.
so basically she's deeply racist and Zionist. I mean, those things go together. And so like I think she can probably take a lot of votes from Don Stewart, especially. I mean, one of the things of this election is that the maple pilling is strong, and so people are drawn to the Liberal Party for that. Um, the maple pilled people are gonna mostly vote Liberal, and that's how they're like siphoning support away from the NDP.
Yeah, and Danielle Smith is, certainly not helping the Conservatives' case that they have nothing to do with Trump, and, I think Polyev is much more of a conventional neo-conservative than, Trump, which you could argue is worse. Um, you could, argue it's not. I mean, I think second term Trump's a bit different from first term Trump. But certainly he's been really aping this style of
Mhm.
right wing populism, which is just a style. It's not a set of policies, um, because conservative politics is a fundamentally elitist project, as are liberal politics. But Yeah, I just found that interesting because that was really what threw a huge wrench into the conservatives' plans. And it's remarkable that they didn't have a plan B. And Carney, who's like the embodiment of this global financial elite that does not care about you, that um, seeks to enrich itself at everyone else's expense, is being hailed as this progressive savior. It's quite remarkable, and I think few people saw it coming.
Yeah, this Carney, he's jumped in. He has presented himself as like, I'm a technocrat. I'm not a politician. I'm not going to be bought, etc. It's not like there's like the career politician of Pierre Polyev and the technocrat who knows everything. Look at all my degrees and credentials. I also think that Carney has a particular like affect in like interviews, where he's like, I'm like a normal person, and I just don't like these are all the jokes about Pierre Polyev going to like Smile School and stuff, or like day 18 of Smile School. Like he does not come across as like a normal person. I think like the Nardwar, I was really struck by Carney's Nardwar interview that he did seem like really happy to be doing that interview and like happy to be talking about music and did the like hip flip
The hip
thing.
flip, classic,
Yeah, like he
classic
was
Nardwuar.
like, "Oh, this is really, like that he hasn't lived in Canada, his whole life, but he's so, like, steeped in, like, like, Canadian kind of polite affect and, like, can do that with Nardwuar." I think people really like him. I think it's, like, oddly smart, the way that Canadian Liberals are to have kind of, started with that Jon Stewart interview, where Jon Stewart is, um lots of like criticisms of him, of course, but he is like a masterful interviewer, right? Like he will like bring out like a good side of somebody if that's like what he intends to do, right? And so Carney came across really well in that. Um yeah, this idea of like Canada being the 51st state, it wouldn't make that much of a difference. It would make like like it would be like in it's unimaginably different, right? To think
Everything it
like
would be yeah, everything would be worse. Like,
everything, and yeah, all of the differences would be more immiseration, more like just people being sick, and like education would be worse, like all kinds of things, transportation, infrastructure, like it would be very bad in all kinds of ways. But think about too the ways that like the people who say the other way, Canada's not for sale. People are like so happy to see Mike Myers. Like again, this is the spectacle, right? Because celebrities are being brought into this. Mike Myers wearing that like you know, Canada's not for sale shirt at SNL, or doing that interview with like, campaign ad with Mark Carney, where it's a list of signifiers of Canadian national mythologies. It's not anything real. It's like, what's your Tim Hortons order? Like that kind of thing, right? But nation is this kind of like imaginary, like abstraction. And it's so powerful. And that I think again is like the thing that it's like the compensation for all the ways that like capital exploits us, that like yeah, capital exploits us, but when I go into the booth, like I actually feel like I'm really doing something voting, and like wow, isn't it so great, like I get a sticker and I've been waiting in line with all these people, we're all doing our civic duty and stuff, and it feels to me very much like, I don't know what the like recent equivalent of a film like this would be, but something like the Barbie movie being like a feminist act, like I'm going like, and it's like communal and feminist, but it's fundamentally about consumption, right? And of course the feminist politics of that are like very stupid, like of the film itself, but it doesn't matter, right? Because it's like I'm having some like communal sense that's also like given a political valence, like Black Panther or Wonder Woman or whatever, like buses of school kids going to see those like quite like horrible politics sorts of films. Um, but that freedom, I don't know. I'm just gonna say like, I think it was Jason Hickel, who's a professor in the
Not
U.S.
to be confused with Jackson Hinkle, the
No, no, not
MAGA
Jackson Hinkle,
communism
Jason
guy.
Hickle,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, Jason Hinkle's cool.
who's actually a researcher, not like yeah.
A
Yeah,
troll.
I think him was like either this was his studies or he was the one who's publicizing it about perceptions of democracy in China versus like in the US, and that people in China, because um they have like different levels of elections, right? Like you have your like local council or whatever, and you have people to contact and things can change. Like people feel like they have a lot of buy-in. Um, I will just say like this two-party system that we kind of have now, like liberals and conservatives, like there are only two parties that can form government, right? In Canada that have been, or like Democrats and Republicans. Then politics and the electoral politics gets reduced to what is going to reproduce the party itself, right? Not actually like do things. So like the modality of like the kind of nice liberalism of like we're gonna give you some social wages a little bit, like enough for you to think that we care. In the 2010s, that was like the bullshit kind of representational politics, like Floyd is murdered, so Kamala Harris is made like vice president, right? So you have that, or you have you're scared all the time because we're making you scared, so we're gonna be like daddy's coming to like protect you, like Papa Trump is gonna like take care of you or whatever. um, but these 4-year election cycles cannot deal with climate crisis, right? That's why like I'm increasingly, I mean, we're not going to be able to like we're just going to have mass death, and these genocides, multiple genocides and things are just like and the COVID pandemic are like priming us to deal like to be inured to mass death. The border policies are about like fortress Europe, fortress America. So like climate refugees can die. They won't be able to come to, where it might be more livable. And so if you have a one party system, like some places that we could name, there's like debate within the system, and there are longer term planning that actually can help the people who live there. And so when you talk about authoritarianism or one party states, it makes sense that like Hickel's research, or if it's his or what he was publicizing it, would indicate that people would feel like they have more buy-in in terms of like how the government of that state is actually governing their lives. Whereas like, the Democrats do better when the Republicans are in power, right? Because they can fundraise off of it and stuff. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying like one party, well, I don't know. I will just like let that thought trail
Well,
off.
well,
You can make your
you mentioned that, the parties, represent the same interests, but yet there are
different
different
modalities.
modalities, and I wanted to talk about a few of them
Mhm.
with you. This past week, conservative leader Pierre Poilievre pledged to recover $1 billion by cracking down on offshore tax havens. His plan has four components. He wants to establish a task force to identify loopholes that are used to stash money abroad, order the Canada Revenue Agency to, in his words, stop harassing and auditing innocent small business owners and shift their focus to offshore tax havens. Um, this one is quite interesting and novel. Offer whistleblowers who expose illegal tax schemes 20% of the money recovered, and to create a name and shame database of multinationals who are avoiding taxes. Sounds okay, right? I mean, lots of rich people are storing their money abroad, could be spent in Canada to build public services, right?
But he's
Right?
not going to spend the money on public services if they get their
Oh,
money.
yes, that's right. He actually plans to use those funds to help fund his proposed $14 billion income tax cut that will offer an average of $450 annually in relief to everyone but the lowest income Canadians who, if you make under 15K a year or so, you don't pay taxes, right? So it's not giving relief to people who are poor. It's giving relief to everyone else, including, as he boasted when he announced his tax cut plan, even, the wealthy. Um, but the thing about this policy is it was clearly framed as a dig at Liberal leader Mark Carney,
Mhm.
who used Bermuda as an offshore tax haven for two low carbon investment funds that he oversaw when he worked for Brookfield Asset Management. Uh, Polyev said, "You can't avoid your taxes. Global elites should not be able to either.
Mhm.
And that is why I will end the liberal two-tier tax system by creating a different two-tier tax system."
Mhm.
Now, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, remember him? He proposed ending tax agreements with jurisdictions like Bermuda and requiring companies to have a quote genuine business reason for offshore accounts, which I'm pretty sure they would argue they already do. Like Polyev, he wants to establish a task force aimed at closing tax loopholes for corporations. And the Liberals notably don't have a policy on limiting offshore tax havens, or at least don't have one that they are advertising in public appearances. Shama, I was wondering what you make of the similarity between the NDP and conservative approaches. Do you think this will encourage the most annoying people alive to do horseshoe theory?
Horseshoe theory, yeah, it's extremely stupid. But yeah, like I think so the problem with the tax havens is that you are taking revenue out of like the government, right? But what is the government spending money on? And if you have all of these like tax cuts, even for corporations, like if we just tax oil companies more, in Alberta, there's no reason why Alberta hospitals should be like underfunded in the ways that they are, right? Like absolutely zero reason. And so yeah, it just seems like, Pierre Polyev would put his money in a tax haven. It's not this is not um but it's just like while you were talking, I was thinking about the Trump Hillary debate where she was like, so there's a liberal way of looking at this that everyone should pay their fair share of taxes because there is an assumption there that the taxes are being used for social good. Right. And like I would say, I'm a single renter. I don't make a lot of money. But if I was at like, I don't need lower taxes if it means like I will still have free healthcare and stuff like that. Right. But she was saying all this stuff, Hillary, like Trump, he's so bad. He's as if, the Clintons don't have whatever weird money things that
They
they
don't
do.
have a body count,
Yeah.
which they do, just not in the way that, the Clinton body count people say.
Yeah. For libel reasons, we're joking. Um, but yeah. She was like, oh, he's so bad. He's so bad. He doesn't pay his taxes because there's a liberal consensus that you should pay your fair that's democratic. It's democratic to pay your fair share of taxes because the government gives you social programs. Trump dispelled it in one sentence. He said, "Yeah, it makes me smart."
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. Like, I'm not doing anything illegal. I
Yeah.
am taking advantage of the system as it is. And yeah, it just takes me back to that obsession over his tax returns. And then the New York Times got a copy of it, and surprise, he didn't pay taxes because he put down losses as write-offs,
Yeah.
and that's how the system works. And it was Hillary who scolded Bernie, who wanted to, change the system. Not that Bernie Sanders is perfect by any stretch of the imagination, and say, well, raising taxes on the wealthy won't end racism. And Yeah, it's like neither
What a
is
demon, like
yeah. Like, actually, like, Hillary Clinton is satanic,
yeah,
just
she's a demon.
not in the way that, these far right guys say
I would
she.
say, like, she's a demon, like, I call like, Obama's a shaitan, like, you know, yeah, but this is the thing about Pierre Poilievre and the NDP, right? They're working on this, like, consensus that it's bad to use this tax haven because that revenue could be going into social services, but for Mark Carney, who's a banker who does these things, and no, and not just him doing it. You don't think like the conservative politicians are doing it too? Like we don't care about hypocrisy, though, right? We've had this conversation
No,
like
yeah,
many times
you got
before.
me off the
Yeah.
hypocrisy, training at the perfect time, which is when I was writing a book about,
uh,
conservative politician.
but it's so disingenuous for Pierre Poilievre to be talking about this because yeah, it is just a different way of um, shifting taxation. Um, it's very like disingenuous like everything else that they're saying, but I will say it doesn't matter because they are tapping in to really fundamental kind of like fears of the moment, which are like brown people are going to like stab you in the alley or something, right? Or they're the reason you don't have a job, they're the reason that you can't buy a house, etc., etc. And so like he said extremely stupid things. He has been like also kind of like fetishizing his crowd size and stuff like that we've seen from other leaders. It doesn't matter though. Like I don't think that they're going to lose support. It's the liberals that are getting the support from the NDP.
Yeah, yeah, it's, I mean, again, I would also, yeah, I mean, again, it's just, rudderless, policy from the NDP. I would add also that Polyev, which is, the person whose policies actually matter because he might be in power, is talking about going after illegal, tax sheltering, right? Which doesn't, like, no one is saying Carney broke the law when
Yeah,
he was with Brookfield. He used the laws to his advantage, right? So he's
that makes
actually,
them smart.
yeah, but Polyev isn't, um proposing a solution to the actual fundamental issue, is how easy it is for people to just park their money abroad. And Singh isn't, for whatever reason, highlighting that and offering an alternative that, tightens these, tax laws, and, it's, quite remarkable. But speaking of things, of illegalities and Polyev's, approach to them, otherwise, this week he, suggested, that he will introduce the, in his words, biggest crackdown on crime in Canadian history if he's elected. Now, the centerpiece of this tough on crime, tough guy agenda that Polyev has put forward is, so-called three strikes and you're
Mhm.
outlaw. These laws, require mandatory minimum sentences of at least 10 years for anyone who's convicted of a third violent offense. These people, Polyev said, would only be released if they demonstrate what he called spotless behavior,
Mhm.
subject themselves to drug testing, and, learn a trade or get a degree while in prison. Um, in 1994, the, great state of California became the first US state to implement a three strikes law under Republican Governor Pete Wilson. That same year, Bill Clinton adopted it federally as part of his infamous crime bill. Poilievre's former boss, Stephen Harper, attempted to pass a three strikes law during his first year in power back in 2006, almost 20 years ago. But he couldn't find support from any of the other parties, in the minority parliament at the time, so it died. But Harper didn't revisit this policy when he had a majority government after 2011. What he did do is impose mandatory minimum sentences for specific crimes, Many of these mandatory minimums were deemed unconstitutional at the Supreme Court, which cited charter protections against cruel and unusual punishment. Now, there is academic research into the effects of three strike laws,
Mhm.
and a study out of William and Mary College in Williamsburg, Virginia, actually increase homicides. They do that because perpetrators who are on their third and final strike are more likely to try and kill potential witnesses to their crime. Now, I know this is surprising to you, Shama, that harsh criminal justice policies are ineffective and unconstitutional, at least in Canada. So, why then do you think the Conservative Party is still pushing them?
This is really old. It's, like, really, really old. So you went back 30 years to the Clinton crime bill. You can go back further than that. This is it's we can call this carceral capitalism. It's part of that contradiction that, I mentioned earlier of, like, who's marked for life and who's marked for death, right? So that is the carceral state. It's part of what Ruth Wilson Gilmore calls like the anti-state state, where the state is only funded to do like police and prisons, basically to do security enhancements and structural adjustments to sort of siphon money. So back to the taxes to siphon money out of workers and into the kind of the ruling class. And so it's very, very, very old. And so, why does it still have purchase? I think it takes on new costumes like in this because instead of it being like black people, it's the South Asians or something like that who are part of gangs like Punjabi gangs or
Right,
whatever, right?
Palestinian
Yeah.
extremists
Yeah, yeah,
who
yeah. So, like, it's things like it takes on these new, like, spectral forms. But it's interesting that you mentioned California as testing this, and California uses extensive, prison slavery, and in 2024 there was a ballot proposal. It is, I think, was Prop 6. Like, okay, I have it open now, Proposition 6, and it was to ban involuntary servitude. So they tried to actually have a ban on this, on like what is considered like one of the like remnants of slavery, right? Like famously, like Michelle Alexander's New Jim Crow, that mass incarceration is where slavery is still legal. It's a way to keep slavery legal. Um, Jackie Wang in her book Carceral Capitalism talks about how like one of the ways that people are able to, keep uh, falling for this is because it's not racist to be against crime. So if you shift this idea that there are certain people who are marked for life and marked for death from like the racial formations of like whiteness and like blackness or whatever fits that context, um, you can say, "No, no, no, it's just criminals," right? And that's how you have, all these like brown people who are being sent to like El Salvador, very like despicable. But anyway, this is in Jackie Wang's piece Against Innocence, which is also available for free online in Lies Journal. But this idea that it's like not racist to be against crime, but why do the law and order parties also are the parties that attract like anti-immigrant, right? Like those two things go together in the conservative party and they go together in the media. So it is like more reported on when especially in our corporate like US owned media of Post Media in Canada that owns both newspapers in Edmonton, and the National Post, and like many of the city newspapers in Canada are only Post Media now.
both in
Where
Ottawa, both in
Yeah,
Calgary,
yeah. So
both in Vancouver.
when an immigrant does a crime that's like spectacular enough to like make the news, it's always like, oh, this person came in on a visa or like something like that. Like, and now they are become like it's all like works together, right? So yeah, it's so old. It's so it's like old as policing itself, like the way that like policing in this place where we live, like North America broadly speaking, like comes out of like slave catchers and stuff, right? Like it's really so old. And I think it also has to do with, um, having having surplus populations. So incarceration expanding in the last like 40, 50 years because of, certain things that are happening economically that have a lot of people who aren't even like the the group of people that are like looking for a job. They're just like surplus, right? Oh, like put them in prisons. But this is going to be in climate crisis. It's going to be like, oh, half of Pakistan is flooded. Oh, okay, that's fine. Like those people are marked for death, right? They're surplus. It's really nefarious, and it's very old, and people it taps into something like the homestead. I need a gun to protect my homestead because there's so much crime. So it's like very much like related to kind of a settler imaginary as well. And so, yeah, what happens in the conservative parties? We have multicultural conservatism, right? So you will have all kinds of South Asians in those parties that'll be like, yeah, it is a big problem. Let me tell you, these Khalistani gangs are doing so much violence. It is a big problem. I am not one of those. You can trust me. I'm like a
Mhm.
good one. So vote for me. I have expertise on how bad all these other brown people are. And so, like, these are the ways that it's like manifesting today. When you say that, like, yeah, three strikes makes more murders, yeah, that makes actually intuitive sense. Like, yes, there's a study, but of course, like that makes sense. Like, if you have such a harsh punishment, it's also this moralizing, in Alberta, like where like I'm from, where you live, the safe consumption sites, they're bad people, that's why they use drugs. They're bad people, that's why they do crime, and so they have to atone for it in all kinds of ways. Um, it's a very, like, deliberate sort of bad guys, good guys, bad guys, instead of, like, what are the conditions under which somebody would, I don't know, like, steal some shit from a store, like, or, like, carjack or something like that. Like, why do those things happen? Why do some places in the world have very little crime compared to like these settler states that we live in?
And there's one last thing I want to talk to you about, which is, I think, somewhat tied into this, and that is how Polyev has, since the conservative leadership race a few years ago, positioned himself as the anti woke candidate, which, again, we're talking about failed policies that are were first implemented
Mhm.
in the United States, coming to Canada via the Conservative Party. Now, we're seeing what this anti woke, anti DEI
Mhm.
crusade looks like in the States with Trump and Musk. And now you're an academic. The field you work in is especially impacted by these sorts of policies. So I guess tell me about what your concerns about this um, anti woke
Mhm.
agenda are.
Yeah, so even like let's think about this term woke that comes from like African American vernacular English, like any invocation of this term like woke or anti, like the anti woke is anti-black, like fundamentally. And so, why is this the word that's circulating? It really, again, all of this stuff is very old. Um so, like, your listeners, viewers, um, probably have heard of the Southern strategy, and so, like, Lee Atwater quite famously, like, in 1981, articulated the Southern strategy of, like, we used to be able to say the N word, right? And that's like what we would do, but now we are, using different language. You have to talk about, cutting taxes, economic things,
And states'
um,
rights. That
yeah,
I
and,
think was
like,
what he said was the substitute for the N word and
yeah, yeah,
other.
yeah, so, like, we need to put something else there, so So like everyone knows what it means. Everybody knows what they mean by anti woke, right? Because there is no definition. So like it has to be something that's consensual that like we all like need to understand what it is. Um, it doesn't mean anything. It means anything like like you're asleep, like you want people to stay asleep, like yes, actually, like they want people not to do critical analysis. But this idea though of like something that's woke is like thinking about race, thinking about gender. DEI is about like black people getting jobs when it's like white women and veterans who are the like the biggest recipients of DEI in the US. So how is this happening in Canada, or like what is its like particular flavor? I would say the anti-trans stuff outside of Alberta has very little purchase compared to the ways that it is going in the US. It tends to be around gender in like an abstract sense, not like anti-trans. So it would be like, like women working or things like they're really trying to like be as like vague as possible. But of course, fundamentally, it's like race, right? It's like all of these immigrants. It's like we've lost our precious Canadian Tire. Canadian Tire has fallen. Like there's too many brown people in it. Canadian Tire has fallen. Like that kind of thing. How it's manifesting in academia. They've been trying this. So I will say there was Shirk funded. So Shirk is part of Tri Council. So most academics, like my doctoral, my like actually my master's and my doctorate were both funded by Shirk. And as an academic, like I've had a Shirk for an event like yeah. So it's very, very like fundamental to what we do is that we apply for these shirks, or if you're in science, an NSERC. And so they want federal funding to not go to like woke, right? What is that? I mean, I'm like a leftist professor. Like everything I do is like informed by like Marxist theory, even if I'm not like explicitly talking about like what they consider woke of like race or things like that. I mean, you can't really talk about anything without like talking about imperialism and capitalism, if you're doing actual like critical analysis. So I will give an example. There was a conference that was it was online. It was kind of hosted by U of A, was one of the hosts, and it received a federal grant, a Shirt Connection grant. And it was a conference on like race and capitalism. And the National Post dug up some tweets of some of the participants, and uh that they were like praising the resistance in Palestine and things like that. So of course that gets made into like just a very stupid article in the National Post. Like I could have written a much better one from like the fascist side, but it was like a stupid person writing a stupid article. Again, it doesn't have to be smart or good. Like this is very, very important. That's why we don't waste our time being like they're hypocritical or they're stupid, because it doesn't have to be smart or good. Because what was the consequence of that? An MP on Heritage, Rachel Thomas, um, tried to get this censured in the House of Commons, and to get like laws put in around like anti-Semitism. In the you can't get a shirk if you're writing something that's like anti-Semitic, which like let's think about how that would be defined, right? So the liberal head of
I'm
Heritage.
pretty sure if you're writing something that's actually anti-Semitic, you're not going to get a shirt grant.
Yeah, you're
But
not going to get a shirt, right? But yeah, so the liberal head of Heritage said, no, well, I don't know what they said, but basically it amounted to like, this is absurd. Like, we're not doing this, right? Had it been a conservative, again, it does not have to be a valid criticism. It does not have to be anything, because you can make hay out of nothing. It would have escalated. And that is what they want. And Pierre Poilievre has said they do not want to have federal funding given to like woke DEI, right? And so that's going to be a really big problem for Canadian academia, not just like humanities and social sciences that I'm a part of, but for NSERC, for people who are doing science. We know that Harper, I think in 2018, this study on like the science muzzling came very firmly on the side of yes, the scientists were muzzled by Harper. And so again, like that's old. Like we don't want any like scientists working on climate crisis. But in the US, like there are people who are losing their like NIH funding for looking at uterine fibroids because it's gender, right? Like you can't, oh, like it's like woke gender if you're like studying like anatomy or something. And so it will, this is when I say the modalities are actually different, even though they're both like reproducing the liberal capitalist state. The modalities are different because it will be the end of like a lot of the work that people are able to do. And I think that if the liberals were smart, some of this is starting to happen already, but they would try to be attracting all of those researchers in the US to come to Canada, invest a ton of money. We could be like world leaders in like biology, in climate science, in the kind of work that I do on like culture and politics. You could get all of these people to come up here, right? Not just the like liberal darlings like Jason Stanley and Timothy Snyder who are going to be at Monk School and like who cares, right? But like I mean actual like really great researchers could be coming up here. I don't know that they will do that, and I worry about like the weaponization of anti-Semitism um with these bubble laws. Like we talked about crime, and Carney was saying like that he also thinks that there should be like protections around places, so like people aren't subjected to hate when they're entering like places of worship. What if you're breaking international law? You know
Yeah, what so just in case listeners aren't familiar, there have been over the past year and a half a series of events held at synagogues in Canada and the United States selling land in Israel, including land in settlements that everyone in the world except the
yeah.
United States and Israel and probably Argentina now agree are illegal. And even when they haven't included land in illegal
Mhm.
settlements, these companies sell land in illegal settlements. So you could still purchase that through them, even if they're not advertising it at the synagogue. So, of course, um, the response to these protests that have occurred outside these illegal land sale events outside synagogues has been, as usual, from the bad faith right and center to say, "Oh my God, they're protesting synagogues. This has gone too far. We need to." I'm as in support of the right to protest as anyone, but you can't protest a religious institution. And it's like, of course, they're not protesting people going to prayers every week. They're protesting a specific event that shouldn't even be taking place in Canada because, again, Canada acknowledges that settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem are illegal. So why is that being allowed to take place? And so this is being used as a pretext to
Watch
crack
out,
down
Jeremy.
on.
People are gonna call you an anti-Semitic. That's
Yeah, well, I can handle that. Someone
no.
of
I'm
my
just joking. I'm just joking.
background,
Yeah.
it's because that's the thing. I mean, for me, I know I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm like one of the most Jewish people around, at least culturally, and a little bit spiritually. But I think about what it means for people who aren't Jewish and aren't Palestinian who want to speak out, but they're scared of being smeared as anti-Semitic, and that's what really drives me to be especially vocal on this topic. But I think it's important to note in this context that this isn't just confined to Palestine. When people say, "Oh, this is conflict that's over there. Why are people protesting about here?" It's like it's
Mhm.
happening here.
It's
Illegal land
happening here.
sales. Canada has a free trade agreement with Israel, which includes the illegal settlements. Uh, Canada sells weapons to Israel. This isn't just limited to Palestine. You see it impact
Yeah.
our right to freedom of expression, academic freedom, and also, I mean, all these other things that are getting caught up in this anti woke dragnet, like trans rights.
Yeah, I mean, I think that so Jeremy and I wrote a piece maybe like almost a year ago now on the encampments. So it's in Orchard. And one of the points there was like we always need an analysis of state power and state interests. And so with something like, so the liberals have said that they would make it a criminal offense to obstruct entry to a place of worship. That's like part of their platform. So one of our comrades, Marley Wasser, she wrote about this in the Rabble, so I can say who it is because it's all public. She went with a bunch of comrades. They were wearing "Jews Say No to Genocide" shirts. This was the Pride of Israel, and she used to go there with her dad when she was a kid. Like it was her childhood synagogue. So she sort of asked, like after seeing this liberal platform, well, aren't they obstructing my right to enter this synagogue? Because they said like you can't come in wearing the t-shirt "You Say No to Genocide," because they were doing a night against hate, right? And that was so Jews Said No to Genocide went there. They're like, oh, a night against hate, like yeah, let's go. And they're like, no, you're not allowed to come in. And she's like, okay, well, should they get in trouble because they obstructed my right as a Jewish person who has a connection to this specific synagogue to participate in this event at the synagogue? And, we know that it's not hypocrisy, right? It's because what is in the interest of the state or not. So, they got roughed up by the cops. She got dragged on the steps of her own childhood synagogue because she's against genocide and she wants like a liberated Palestine, right? But she is also like deeply Jewish in like a religious way and a cultural way. You're both from Thornhill, so like growing up kind of culturally, but also like spiritually. And so, when we see these laws, like any law, they're not equally enforced. And so we are going to see like, so yeah, I don't know. I think it's quite scary to think about that happening, to think about, what is already underway. Like when we say that things like the deportation of Mahmoud Khalil is precedent for something, let's say we're not proceeding anything, like we're living in it, right? Things are already happening. But in Canada, I do think I don't know. I don't know if we want can be hopeful about things, but we just it's the struggle, right? The To your first question of like, do electoral politics matter? I don't think we should cede any terrain of struggle, especially one that controls the police and military and healthcare and education and all of the laws that we're subject to. Like, why would we cede that? Even though like, we hate it, but like why would we cede that? So yeah, is there going to be an appetite in Canada like this maple pilling for more social democracy, for Mark Carney saying something like with housing, I'm gonna do like a YIMBY, like just increase supply, just like make a lot of houses, right? Is there going to be like, is there more of an appetite for that? Of when people like us would say, okay, but like who's gonna be able to live in those houses, right? Like what are the other conditions around housing that are gonna make those that housing accessible to people? But yeah, if there's like a bit of like hope or something, it could be like maybe there will be an appetite for more social democracy here when we see just how people are getting kidnapped and sent to like death camp. Really, no one has ever gotten out of that CCOT prison in El Salvador, so it is like a death camp. Um, yeah, like just sent there, like snatched off the street and sent there. So um maybe we will have more appetite for social democracy here. I don't know.
I just one last thing I want to note because you mentioned Mahmoud Khalil. Just today, actually, I have a headline that was republished in the Times of Israel, but it looks like it's from AFP, the wire
Mhm.
service, saying that Polyev renewed
Yeah.
a call he had made earlier to deport temporary residents who, in his view, engage in anti Semitism. And he was clear he was talking about crimes like vandalism and violent attacks, but also said hate marches, which is, of course, what right wingers refer to any demonstration in support of the Palestinian cause. So, again, pretty hard to beat the allegation that you are a Canadian version of Trump when you're promising to bring in those types of draconian legislations and to crack down on woke DEI and to bring in uh, harsh criminal justice policies that actually lead to more severe crime. Um, and yeah, I think again, to bring it back to I think your main point here, voting is harm reduction. You know, in a way. I mean, get if you can stop someone who is far worse, who's going to make things. I mean, things are going to get worse under Carney. Like, let's be clear here,
Yeah.
but they're going to get worse a lot faster under Polyev. And so if you're in a position to vote against that, whether it's for voting for the Liberals or the New Democrats, or if you live on Vancouver Island, the Greens,
Mhm.
then yeah, I mean, I always vote. I understand why people don't. You know, that because it's not, you know, it's not gonna you're not going to change the system by participating in it. But again, you can slow down the
Mhm.
descent.
Yeah, so there's a counter argument to that, which is that if you keep voting in these liberals, they will just like tack to the right. We won't get any kind of like whatever reform revolution depending on your orientation. And so like I think that that argument has more purchase, I think, in a place like the US when the Democrats are actually like quite right wing, like along the lines of the conservatives in a lot of ways
Mhm.
here. Um, there's the, accelerationist argument of like, yeah, if you keep like kind of staving it off by having these like little band-aid solutions of like the liberals coming in and like, we're gonna build some houses, or like I'll have half of my cabinet be women because like I'm a feminist or whatever, right? That these are like not actually things that are going to like fundamentally change the system under which like the modality that is like fascism foments, right? And like thrives, right? The way that liberalism and fascism are related. Um, I I really understand that theoretical argument, or like maybe it's not even theoretical. Like, I mean, I do think that like liberalism, um, when liberalism is no longer buttressed by like wealth accumulation, by the accumulation of capital that allows it to be able to do those like little things that like keep people kind of happy and liberal, um, that it has nothing else to offer, and so it will like tack right, and the fascists will always be able to outright them, right? Um, Nevertheless, we have to live day to day. And so like that's sort of like where I'm at. And it's like we're always like negotiating a series of choices. Like when we wake up in the morning, like everything that we do, right? Are like practices like as like a person in the world, as like as social political beings in the world. So I don't buy the accelerationist argument. I do buy the liberalism, fascism, because that's like my work. But nevertheless, like what we're seeing with these deportations, that Polyev has said he wants to do that, I find like quite terrifying. And so like whatever time we can buy to not have that happen, I would want that, like and yeah. I don't think
Well,
it's, like, living out to say that it will be disastrous in, like, many, many ways for the conservatives to be elected.
thank you so much for joining me this afternoon, Shama. Where can people keep up with your work?
Yeah, so, my socials are a bit on lock right now for some reasons, will not be forever. Yeah, but I'm at Fritz Lasha, like, on all my socials. I'm so term is done, and I'm part of this Progressive Publics, like, it's my project where we bring together, like, academics and media folks. We had an event in Toronto in November, one in Montreal uh, in March or February, and we're gonna have one in Calgary in June. And part of this is like my greater sort of project of how to think about like academics being able to connect with different sectors of the public, like of the left. How do we talk to each other? So like definitely like Jeremy inviting me on this is like I'm so happy to do it. And I always like Jeremy and I are like longtime comrades as well. So it's just like a pleasure to be here. But I might start like I keep saying this, and if I keep saying it, I will do it. But I'm thinking of doing like a weekly like Twitch stream where it's just like what's happening in the news. Or like if I have some sort of culture, like what research am I working on, or like a chapter of like a book, a theory book or something that I'm reading on like Marxist theory that I can try to make digestible to people who are non-academics. Like I haven't started it yet, but I think that I might do it. So yeah, I'm Prof. Shaminator on Twitch. So if I keep saying it, I'll do it, I think. So yeah.
Yeah, and hold Shama accountable if you're listening. Keep it, every day she doesn't have a Twitch stream running, ask her what happened to it. Where is it? And yeah, I know I'm very much looking forward to watching it. I always learn a lot from you, and am really grateful that you came on to discuss the stakes of
Mm.
the federal election that is happening in 2 weeks from tomorrow.
Oh boy. Well,
Yeah. All right.
okay, I'll
Ciao.
see you in Edmonton this summer.
Yeah, or Calgary
Okay,
in
yeah.
June.